Hello everyone, Cheeps here, and I'm back with a different thing from our last video. We're going to be looking at deck profiles for Disney's Lorcana. Now, I'm personally a really big fan of this game. I think it's super fun. I still love Pokemon. Pokemon will always have a special place in my heart, but this game is just really fun, really creative, so I thought I better try and do some deck profiles for this. So today we're talking about the newest set at the time of recording this, Azurite Sea. I'm already kind of dating myself because it's December 7th and we've just got the announcements for Set 7 and Set 8 coming next year. But I feel like it's still a good enough time as ever to talk about an archetype from the newest set that I'm really enjoying that's more supporting an older card, Winnie the Pooh Pirates. So pirates have been around since the first set of Lorcana, but they didn't really do too much as an archetype as they weren't really too tribal yet, but that's also due to the game just beginning and them not wanting to lock anything into a strict archetype. However, with the third set, Into the Inklands, giving us Piglet Pooh Pirate Captain, it was only a matter of time before an entire archetype was built around it. And now, with the release of Set 6, we finally have that in the form of Winnie the Pooh Pirates. So I'm going to do a breakdown of this card by card, of what I consider to be the core of Winnie the Pooh Pirates. So to start us out, we have to run 4 copies of Winnie the Pooh Honey Pirate. Really good 2/2/2 with a quest for 1, and whenever it quests, you pay 1 less for the next pirate you play this turn, which is really good when you have 1-drop pirates like Rabbit, who's good for damage removal, but also just good ink fodder. Rue, Littlest Pirate, who's good for debuffing. Owl, who is also very good for debuffing and just for ink support. Gopher is just a big defensive wall to set up that quest for 2. And finally, the big boss man himself, Piglet Pooh Pirate Captain. While you have 2 or more other characters in play, this character gets 2 more lore. So you're basically just setting up Winnie the Pooh as fast as possible so Piglet can be questing for 3 consistently. But obviously, you need protection with this, which is why I run a few copies of Simba Protective Cub. You can run other bodyguards with this, but this is just the first bodyguard that comes to mind, and it synergizes well with Simba Pride Protector, a legendary from the new set, which is really good at protecting, as when it's tapped, you may untap all your other characters, making them unable to be attacked. Obviously, they can still die to forms of removal, but for Shift 3, that's really good. As for other cards that are being ran in this, we have a copy of Pluto Friendly Pooch to get that early game ramping, as well as Gaston Despicable Dealer to also help with that ramping. If you can set up a Pluto turn 1 and then Gaston turn 2, you're basically set for getting out all your pirates. And on top of that, we also run a few copies of Jim Hawkins as a slightly better bodyguard later in the game. He's also really good for grabbing out pirates that you may be searching for. So I'd say it's probably worth it to try to get him out as fast as possible. In terms of actions, I feel like the only action that would really be required in Amber specifically for this archetype would be Just in Time, allowing you to play any of your Pooh Pirates basically for free, as well as Simba. It's a downside that you can't play Jim Hawkins with it, but it's just a price you have to pay. In terms of songs, Be Our Guest is insanely good for this deck. Just being able to search for your high volume count of characters is really good, and I'd highly recommend playing 3 to 4 copies of it in any deck. Zero to Hero is also really good since you're going to be paying a lot of ink to play your characters, so just being able to reduce that cost or just even playing characters for free is actually insane for this deck. We're also running a few copies of I Won't Give In, really good against certain mill strategies, especially Mad Hatter's Teapot being a really good mill option now, just allowing us to return basically any of our low-cost characters to the deck. And I'd also recommend a few copies of Look at This Family, basically just a better Be Our Guest, but it has the sing-along mechanic, so you don't have to have out 1 character or use the 7 ink required. But with that, let's look at 3 different example deck lists that I've come up with. The first deck list we're going to be looking at is Pooh Pirates Amber Ruby with Tigger as its main focus. Tigger is the only pirate in the Ruby category for Winnie the Pooh. He's an evasive character that only costs 3 to play. That's pretty good, but on top of that, his ability to gain Strength and lore is really good, so we load this deck up just fully with actions. On top of that, we're also running a few copies of Windy Darling for some nice quick lore. Having it basically be a 2/2/2 with evasive is really good, especially in formats where there are a lot of evasive characters running around. And the last pirate I'd say is a must-have for this is Kakamora Boarding Party. This is an insanely good card. Rush with 5 is actually wild, especially when you can reduce its cost with Winnie the Pooh. Hello everyone, Editor Cheeps here. So one thing I forgot to mention during the Amber and Ruby section of this is that Maui Half Shark is a pretty good card. When I originally built my idea of what you could use, I was incorporating for budget. However, this card is insanely good due to its ability to recycle actions, as well as the additional lore gain per action being played. Alternatively, you could play this pretty well if you were willing to drop the Pooh Pirate engine and just play Maui and Tigger in, say, Ruby and Emerald. But if you guys would like to see a video of me kind of covering the idea, let's get this video up to, let's say, 20 likes, and I'll make a profile for it. Anyway, back to the video. Or by playing it just in time to get it out earlier than you need to. In terms of actions, we're running several copies of Good Job. This is really good for ramping up the Tigger late game, but if you open it early game, you can also just pitch one into the inkwell and be completely fine. Fan the Flames is great for protection if you can't consistently get out your Simba and you still need to protect Piglet. It's really good. Also protects Tigger if your opponent is playing a very evasive heavy build. He's got a sword, really good, especially since we're running Kakamora in this, to take out any big threats like Musketeer Goofy or just anything with a very high defensive stat. Thievery is really good, just being able to gain lore and make your opponents lose lore can just clutch out the game sometimes. Our songs are mainly the same, but we're also including the addition of 2 copies of Be Prepared, a borderline staple in any Ruby deck. You need the board wipe. All in all, I'd say this is a really good deck, plays very aggressively with all the low-cost actions, so I'd say if you're wanting to build the deck, and for a relatively good price, this is probably the deck for you. Our next deck list is Pooh Pirates built around Amber and Emerald. This uses the new Stitch cards that came out in the set, as well as some of the other new pirates. We're running a few copies of Stitch, Little Trickster, just a really good early game card for its low cost, and its ability to get really strong if you need it late game to take out a character is really good, but we're mainly using it to get into the Floodborn Stitch Alien Buccaneer. His ability to grab back any action and put it on top of the deck when he's shifted is really good, and he has just a really good stat line overall, especially for how low cost he is, especially for a shift. Like a shift 3 that just lets me recycle an action card is really good. We're also running copies of a Donald Duck First Mate to go with our captains, such as Piglet, or Jim Hawkins, or Captain Hook Underhanded, who is really good for the mirror match against pirates due to his ability of being tapped, stopping pirate characters that your opponent controls from questing. And unless they have removal, you're going to be getting a little bit of card draw from that as well. In terms of actions for this deck, 4 copies of Mosquito Bite is just insane, especially for handling one-tap enemies. Really good for a singular lore. And worst case scenario, you can bank one into your ink and you'll be completely fine. We're also running 3 copies of You Came Back, which is good for protection, but also just being able to quest again with a big character like Piglet is really strong on its own. With this deck list, I'm also including locations, mainly 100 Acre Island. It's a really good ink early game if you don't want to use it, but just the ability to bring all of your pirates there and basically taunting your opponent to kill them to then gain lore is insanely good, albeit a very weak location. You could combine this with cards like Fix-It Felix Jr. to buff it up a little bit, but if you're wanting to go for the pure pirate build, you just kind of have to bank on it not getting destroyed first, which isn't the biggest problem unless your opponent's on steel with cards like Rise of the Titans or Billy Bones. But with that, let's look at our final deck list for this video. The last deck we'll be looking at for this video is a Sapphire Amber list built around Alice in Wonderland, specifically Alice Growing Girl, just the ability to give all of your characters support and boost her up to 10 to quest for 5 in a turn is absolutely insane, especially when you combine it with cards like Simba, just allowing you to protect Alice as much as possible. We're also running a few copies of Chicha, Dedicated Mother. Just that extra card draw with your extra ink drops goes a very long way. Additionally to this list, we're running a few copies of Alice Savvy Sailor. This is just a personal pick of mine. This is more of a pet deck, but none of these lists should be taken too seriously. They're more suggestions. But a 3-drop with Ward that quests for 2 is actually really good, having 4 defense. And the ability to quest, boost up one of your characters, and give them Ward as well makes this card go a long way. But to give this a pirate, that actually works, since this Alice unfortunately is not considered a pirate. We have Ben, Eccentric Robot, as your robot to add, and it even gives support already, but a support 4 into Alice can go a very long way. As for the actions, we're running 4 copies of Sail the Azurite Sea. Just that extra ink drop and card draw for only 2 ink goes a very, very long way, as slowly becoming a staple for any blue deck. On top of that, we're also running 4 copies of Visions of the Future. I was debating between this or Develop Your Brain or a 2-2 split of each, but I feel like 4 copies of this is really good. Just being able to see further ahead really can help out. It does still have its big drawback of putting stuff at the bottom, but it's a risk you're just going to have to take while playing this deck. As for the songs, we're running 2 copies of One Jump Ahead for that extra ink gain, which is nice since we have a lot of 2-drop characters in here that could sing it. Friend Like Me, just insanely powerful card for Sapphire in general. I think most decks should be running minimum 2 copies of it. It does still give your opponent a little bit of a boost, but it can also really be helpful if they're stacking their deck towards something. You can then just Friend Like Me, and they're not getting that resource back. And additionally to this list, we're running 2 copies of Dig a Little Deeper. This is a card that I feel is kind of underappreciated, but it's also partially because it's a sing together song. But being able to look at 7 and grab 2 is really strong. I'd say, honestly, you could probably bump this to 3 and bump down Vision of the Future. But that's just me. That's just an idea. In terms of items, we're, of course, running 4 copies of Popsicle. Gotta get that additional draw, and healing can be pretty good. And 2 copies of Greatstone Dragon. I think this is a really underappreciated item. Like, it saw a good chunk of play when Ursula's Return first came out, but I just don't see enough deck lists running this card. This could probably be a 3 or a 4, but I like keeping my lists nice and consistent at 60 cards. I think this is, all in all, a pretty good addition, especially since you're going to have characters that are going to die, so you may as well get a little bit of extra use out of them, especially since this list doesn't run Grand Matala. And those are just some idea deck lists for Winnie the Pooh Pirates. Now, like I said, this is just a suggestion. It's not concrete deck lists. Don't go, like, make these lists and then lose really hard and be like, oh, well, Sheeb said it's a really good list. I think they're good ideas, but I'd like to see what my community can come up with a little bit, and I'm not the best deck builder, but I think I can create some pretty interesting ideas, and a lot of people are really good at expanding at it. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I know I'm not the best at speaking and telling people my ideas of how decks work, but I think personally this is a pretty decent video. I'm hopeful that we get some comments of some really good ideas that I may have missed on. Special thanks to my friend Sylvie. She's been very supportive and loves the idea of the Winnie the Pooh Pirates deck. Hopefully I can bring it with me to locals in the near future. So that's going to be all from me. Peace out.